3, 2, 1. Dr. Chrys Michaelides, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Svett.
Thank you for being here.
Not a problem. I've got better things to do, but that's okay. This is important.
This is important.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Let's start with a bit of an intro.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you? What do you do?
Okay. All right. I'm a GP who's been doing what I've been doing for 37 years, who basically has spent the last 30 years specialising in chronic disease management, in particular diabetes, osteoporosis and other metabolic disorders. That doesn't mean to say I don't see patients without those disorders, but I have found that as you become interested in these things, people are drawn to a certain style of approach. And my approach to chronic disease management has always been and will stay structured care. So I am focusing on the human being with the condition, not the condition itself. Now, what does that mean? And we tend to, as a society, label people. Like you'll always hear the term, I'm epileptic, I'm depressed, I'm stressed, I'm schizophrenic, I'm diabetic. You'll never hear somebody say, I'm heart attacked, or I'm breast cancer, or I'm prostate cancer. So what I've been working on for years is trying to shift the thought processes and the ideology that people are defined by a disease process. So in my practice, it will be Joe who has type 1 diabetes or Joe who has type 2. It'll be Mary who has osteoporosis. She's not osteoporotic. She has osteoporosis, along with all the other health issues that she may be. So everything needs to be person-centric. Everything needs to be about focusing on that human being with the condition. Now that philosophy and ideology goes back 2,400 years to Hippocrates. He said, focus on the human being with the condition, not the condition in the human being. So I'm here to spread the word.
That's powerful.
Yeah, that we are human beings with health conditions that we have got the ability to control completely.
The amount of times I hear it in the community from other health professionals making those mistakes, labeling our patients, going, oh, yeah, I'm referring you a diabetic, or da-da-da.
Yeah, no, it's okay to use the adjective diabetic or osteoporotic when you're describing a end organ damage, like an osteoporotic fracture. It identifies that that fracture was due to osteoporosis, not trauma as in traumatic fracture. And it's okay to use the word diabetic, the adjective, in front of the organ diabetic nephropathy as in kidney disease due to diabetes, or diabetic retinopathy as in loss of vision due to disease damaged blood vessels at the backs of the eyes due to diabetes, instead of hypertensive retinopathy, which is due to blood pressure. So it's okay to use the adjective to describe the complication, not the human being. You're thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I've never thought of it that way because, over the years I've just tried to stay clear of...
The adjective.
Stayed clear of the adjective and used, living with MS.
Yes.
Or living with diabetes.
Yeah.
And that's been powerful for me as a clinician.
Because as soon as you remove the adjective from describing the human being, the condition becomes more manageable.
Yeah.
The person, and not patient, the person living with diabetes, say, I'm Joe, I live with type 2 diabetes. And it's not Dr. Smith who's living with type 2 diabetes. It's Joe who's living with type 2 diabetes. And as soon as they start thinking like that, I live with it, just like I live with everything else, I can control it. It's up to me, with help, to manage this chronic disease, whether it be diabetes or osteoporosis or heart disease or kidney disease. As soon as someone takes ownership, the doors open and everything can change. Whilst someone is resisting taking ownership and relying on other people to manage their chronic disease or their health condition, we are basically marching on the spot. Nothing will change until the individual with the disease process is part of the management team.
That's an effective tool to help them take ownership of what's going on.
Very much so, yeah.
Have you come across any other strategies that help our patients take ownership?
Yes, 2 or 3 that I've developed over the last 6 months and that I'm finding very useful. One is to ask the question, if you were to stay the way you are today for the rest of your life, would you be pleased, really dissatisfied, or just okay with it? Now, that's an important question because it makes them reflect about how they're physically feeling. All right? Now, if someone's feeling really physically well, then they'd say, yeah, I'd be really happy to stay like this the rest of my life. So our role as healthcare professionals is to help them maintain that level of health. If they're so-so, it's a point of discussion. And if they say, no, I would really not want to spend the rest of my life being like this, then that opens the discussion with, okay, what are you going to change? Because if nothing changes, nothing will change, and nothing can change. And if you don't start engaging, you're not going to manage how you live with your chronic disease. Right, so that's one of the tools.
Yeah.
The other part of the tool is I've started asking patients, I know you feel well, right, and you feel fine, and you cannot feel your diabetes, and you cannot feel your osteoporosis. And they go, no, my back hurts, therefore it's the osteoporosis that's causing the pain. No, it's the arthritis that's causing the pain. You will not feel osteoporosis until you break something, until you have a fracture. It's the end organ damage that you're feeling. The same with the kidney disease and diabetes, or the eyes, or the heart disease, or the peripheral neuropathy of diabetes. That you will feel, but you will not feel your blood glucose levels until they're very, very high. So I've started asking patients how they're feeling, and then the next question after that is, have you ever felt better? And once they identify that how they're feeling compared to how they felt 6 months, a year ago, is not as good as it was, they engage, how can I get back to that?
Such a good tool to engage with them, get them on board. I really like that. I think, one of your many strengths is that time that you invest and the energy that you invest in the education process along the way.
Education and understanding, very powerful. What we want to do is, and everything from every organisation is about self-care and self-management in the health industry. Because at the end of the day, anybody with any chronic disease or process that they're living with, they will have to deal with that 99.8% of the time on their own. 0.2% of the time, they're actually interacting with healthcare professionals like yourself and myself, and pharmacies and dietitians and specialists. 0.2% of the time they spend engaging with a team.
Yeah.
But 99.8% of the time, they're living with this on their own. So if we can improve their understanding and give them tools of knowledge, then they have a better chance of improving and managing their health. Now, the key, though, is we improve their knowledge, we've educated them, they have to actually use it, right? And that's the second barrier. The first is I want to learn. The second is I haven't got the motivation to actually take that and extend my ability to manage. So sometimes we have to hold the hands of people to get them to that level of self-confidence that they can actually use that information that they've made and internalised into knowledge to manage their chronic disease processes. And those patients that are able to self-manage, they're the ones that will be able to reverse some of their chronic conditions. And maybe what we need to discuss further down the track is the reversal of type 2 diabetes. Is it possible? What does the data tell us? Or, for example, cognitive impairment, which is the term we like to use instead of the word dementia. But is there ways that we can improve cognitive impairment or stall its progress and its decline? What strategies? Is it simply understanding the disease process, Or is it simply doing certain forms of exercise, both physical and mental exercises, to stimulate and help that brain plasticity that we all read about to reduce the rates of Alzheimer's that we're seeing in the community moving forward? Because at the end of the day, it's not how long you live, but how long you live well. And we know that in Australia, blind Freddie can see it, how many people over the age of 90 are we actually seeing in the community now? I know my waiting room is no longer the same as it was 20 years ago. I'm seeing on average at least 3 people over the age of 90 per day, and probably another 10 people over the age of 80 per day. So what used to be the mean life expectancy when I first started general practice, mean life expectancy was males would live to about 72 to 75 and women would live 75 to 78. And then suddenly we're now talking about people living 88 to 92 as their mean life expectancy, which was what was projected 20 years ago, that by 2020 mean life expectancy would be 88 to 92. And it's been confirmed. They're now projecting that by the year 2030, just 10 years away, mean life expectancy is going to be 96.
Wow.
Now, what's the point of living long if you're going to have poor quality of life? So it's not how long you live, but how long you live well. So the aim of any intervention, any support system we put in place, any therapy that's offered needs to be wellness. Let's get optimal health with optimal nutrition and optimal physical activity and optimal medications that may be necessary at times to give these people their longevity with wellness.
Longevity with wellness.
Yeah.
That's some serious numbers with the increase in life expectancy.
Yeah.
And it being confirmed.
Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, if we start, let's go back 2,400 years. There were no motor cars, no motorbikes, no bicycles. So what did people do? They used to walk to get from place A to place B, or ride horses or donkeys. Now, but the majority would walk. So Hippocrates, back on the island of Chrys 2,400 years ago, you know what? Walking is man's best medicine. And I still believe that, because it's like a daily vitamin that we need. If we need optimal health, and health is about a balance between stuff that we put in, such as smoking and alcohol. And I'm not a great supporter of smoking. I think it should be a product that should be banned. There is so much evidence that it is a promoter of atherosclerosis and other lung complaints and cancers of the esophagus and cancers of the bowel. So it's a drug. It's pure and simply a drug. But it's sold and people will smoke. They know that it's causing them harm, but they struggle to stop because they become addicted to it. And it's like any other addiction, which is what food addiction comes. You know, we live in a society that over 64% of our society currently is deemed to be obese or overweight. That means only 36% of our population are living in a healthy weight range.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean that 36% do not develop chronic diseases? They do. They just develop them at a later rate, whereas the overweight and the obese develop the chronic diseases at an earlier stage. And classically, the chronic diseases that overweight and obese people develop is the metabolic diseases, such as the diabetes, insulin-resistant syndrome, the hypertension, the hypercholesterolemia, hyperlipidemia, and the renal damage of leaking protein from the kidneys. So back in 2,400 years ago, Hippocrates didn't have the benefit of blood pathology, checking out electrolytes, checking blood glucose level, checking heart rates in response to exercise or doing stress tests. But he was wise enough to say those people that walked actually lived longer and better. So walking is man's best medicine. Now, people believe that's all I've got to do, so we've just got to walk. And I'm leading us somewhere, so be patient with it, right? It's building.
I'll stay patient.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the diabetes prevention program, which was done in the United States, and it basically had 3 arms. And this is really important, the 3 arms that it had. So the 3 arms it had was 2 drug arms. One was looking at metformin, a common insulin sensitizing medication in diabetes. And the second one was looking at carbohydrate blockers, blocking carbohydrate absorption. So the psychologists back then, when they were designing the program, said, hey guys, why don't you actually put in a control group of lifestyle intervention? Okay? Good old Renee, basically Renee Wing, I think I remember her name, dynamite personality, very charismatic when she presents. So she convinced them and they put it in. So here we've got a lifestyle arm, and the lifestyle arm was basically saying we've got patients with glucose intolerance, pre-diabetes, and what we want to do is prevent the progress to type 2 diabetes. So the drugs were known to do it, but they weren't sure whether physical activity and food control would achieve it. At the conclusion of the study and the monitoring, they showed that 52% of the people in the lifestyle arm only, no drugs, managed to prevent progress from pre-diabetes to diabetes. 38% of the drug arms prevented progress. So the message was really clear. Lifestyle has to be the foundation of prevention of chronic disease. Now, when you break down that lifestyle arm, it was 8% weight loss and physical activity of approximately, from memory, 40 minutes most days of the week. So 160 minutes. Let's say 3 hours of physical, not too vigorous, physical activity. So that then, the news came out, that's it, foundation, lifestyle. Then add the drugs on top of that. Remembering they didn't have diabetes, so they were using oral hypoglycemic agents to lower blood glucose levels to prevent the progress of pre-diabetes to diabetes. And so that's what we would do in practice. We would use the lifestyle. Then we asked the question, but why are these patients continuing to put on weight? We wanted physical weight loss, but they're doing the 3 hours a week of physical activity and they're observing nutritional foundation guidelines. Why are they gaining weight? Because everything was focused on prevention of progress, not weight management and not physical fitness. It was prevention of progress from pre-diabetes to diabetes. So as a consequence, right, in 2008, I was fortunate enough to be in California, at San Francisco, California, at the American Diabetes Association conference. And they were basically debating and discussing the role of exercise versus physical activity and diet in the prevention of progress, and why are we still seeing this ever-increasing obesity problem. And so one of the professors from Joslin Diabetes Center in New York gave a presentation. And I always love telling patients about this because it just shows how wrong we got it and how right we got it now. So he asked the audience, and there was about, I think, 2,500, 3,000 people in the audience, big symposium. And he asked the audience, how many of you wear pedometers? And, first question, everyone's shy. No one's going to put their hand up. So someone starts, and then we all look around. Well, if he's put his hand up, I'll put mine up. So you put, very good, fantastic. How many of you do 10,000 steps a day? Took a split second. Everyone who were all up. He says, congratulations, you're all going to gain 3 kilos in the next 12 months. And we went, He says, we got it wrong. He says, we extrapolated the diabetes prevention program data to the general population. And it was for the prevention of progress of chronic disease. It was not for weight management. He says, no, we need to do more physical activity for prevention of weight gain and we need to do even more if we want to lose weight. All right? So the ante got upped, and suddenly this 10,000 steps a day, which is a catchy phrase, just 10,000 steps a day became 12,000, 16,000 steps.
Okay.
And everyone went, nah, there's no way we can fit that into the day. And so he concluded with this ideology back then. We've discovered and worked out that if you're not able to do it more, you need to change and ramp up the exercise every 6 weeks.
Okay.
Because your body adapts, and it will no longer be as caloric burning as it was 6 weeks ago when you're doing consistent physical activity as in walking, because your body becomes very efficient at holding on to energy because it doesn't want to lose weight. You have to force it to lose weight. All right? And so then Renee got up and gave a speech, and she talked about the, what was it? She says, I was out of a job, so I had to go and find funding resources. So she got funding for the National Weight Register in the United States. And she enlisted people, never saw them. It was all data collection. So she collected data from people to see what were the commonalities amongst people who managed to lose weight and keep it off for more than 2 years. That's the only way you could get into the register for the study. And then she analysed commonalities. All right? Now, you ready?
So keen.
Okay,
Yeah.
the commonalities. Number one, okay, a minimum. They had to do a minimum 40 minutes per day of physical activity every day.
Okay.
All right? Minimum. They watch TV for less than 2 hours a day. They all had breakfast. All right? And all of them had calorie restrictions. All of them. So what she was able to show was that for weight loss and management, you had to address the quantity of food that you ate, and you had to address the amount of exercise you were doing. And the minimum for prevention of progress from chronic disease to pre-diabetes to diabetes, as an example, was not enough to prevent weight gain, and it was not enough to achieve weight loss in the absence of calorie restriction.
That's fascinating.
All right.
So classic calories in,
Yep.
calories out per day.
Absolutely.
Extrapolate
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Now let's go back with our time machine to Hippocrates, 2,400 years ago. Walking is man's best medicine. He didn't have a problem with Western society's eating patterns, fast foods, high sugar load, high fat load. He basically had no dietary problems because they were eating a classic plant-based diet and eating foods that were in season. They would slaughter an animal infrequently, and they would eat foods of the region. So we're talking really organic. And that walking is man's best medicine because it was actually an activity of daily living. And over the years, as the more I talk about it with patients, they say, I go for a walk. And I go, that's admirable, it's fantastic, because that's an activity of daily living. Just like having a shower, getting dressed, playing with the grandchildren, talking to the children, reading, they're activities of daily living. They're essential, okay? So walking is an activity of daily living. It's not an add-on, right? Life begins as soon as we get out of bed in the morning, wash our faces, have showers, have breakfast, and walk. It's an activity of daily living, and there should never be a day that we do not walk. Now, how much you walk is the interesting thing. And I tell all my patients, you need to do a minimum 4 to 5 kilometre walk per day if you want to manage your weight or lose weight. And they go, why did you specify distance and not time? And I said, because it's the distance that dictates the amount of caloric expenditure. If you have a Big Mac, and let's say it's got 600 calories, as an example, if you eat it in 3 bites, you've consumed 600 calories. if you take 10 bites and you have a nibble at breakfast, a nibble at morning tea, a nibble at lunchtime, a nibble at afternoon tea, you've still consumed those 600 calories over the entirety of the day. The same goes with physical activity, e.g. walking. If you can walk at 8 kilometres an hour, which is verging on a jog, and you walk your 4 to 5K in 30 to 35 minutes, you've burnt the same number of calories as you have if you took an hour and a half to walk it. The distance is the key from the point of view of resting energy expenditure, baseline activity of daily living, and moving around and enjoying the benefits of that activity of daily living. Now, gymnasiums existed back in the time of Hippocrates, and we won't go into the definition of gymnasium, but it existed. Resistance training existed. It's Western society that has actually converted resistance training into part of what we need to do, but everyone hates the term no pain, no gain, because people don't like pain. And I'm a firm believer that you don't have to have pain to do resistance training activity. And resistance training, building up a muscle, is absolute paramount when it comes to chronic disease management and prevention. When I used to do talks for Diabetes Australia, and one of my talks would be, if I sucked a kilo of fat out of you, say, yeah, and you don't have much fat, right? And I injected you with a kilo of muscle, what would your weight do? Would it go up, down, or stay the same? Do the maths.
What were they telling you?
No, you tell me what your answer would be. I've sucked a kilo of fat out. I've injected a kilo of muscle in.
Same.
Absolutely. Right? So the audience would say to me, your weight's gone up. Why? Because muscle weighs more than fat. I go, no. I took out a kilo and I put a kilo in. So your weight stays the same. All right? The difference is it occupies less space. So you get leaner. And we know that lean muscle tissue is much more insulin sensitive than fatty muscle tissue. So the leaner somebody becomes through resistance training and strengthening, the more insulin sensitive that person becomes. So I've maneuvered us into the discussion on insulin. And people in society, they hate hearing this term insulin resistance, and it's, you know, all my problems are due to my obesity. Well, no, your problems aren't due to your obesity. Your problems are due to the insulin resistance that your obesity has created. Now, insulin resistance has been implicated in dementia, right? Because insulin resistance is a contributor to inflammatory proteins. Now, the enzymes in the brain that are responsible for breaking down the insulin will preferentially break down the insulin instead of those inflammatory proteins. And so those inflammatory proteins stay circulating in the brain tissue longer, and they deposit out. And when they deposit on the synapses, they deposit as amyloid type tissue. And we now know that patients with diabetes and people with insulin resistance have higher rates of cognitive decline than people without diabetes or without insulin resistance. So the key is, can we prevent those inflammatory proteins developing? In turn, we're going to prevent future dementia. So that's one tick, the benefit of improving insulin sensitivity. Can we also prevent complications of diabetes if we can improve insulin sensitivity? Now, if we improve insulin sensitivity, we're actually improving blood glucose control, because the whole problem in diabetes, whether it be type 1 or type 2, for simple purposes, is that high glucose levels will attach to proteins. Now, when they attach to hemoglobin, they glycosylate the hemoglobin, and it becomes a glycated hemoglobin, a glycated protein. Now, that's the one that we can measure in the bloodstream. So we can measure what percentage of your total red blood cells have become glycated. The higher the percentage, the longer your body has been exposed to higher glycation, higher glucose. Now, that's all well and interesting, but glycated hemoglobin is harmless. The red blood cells die, they get filtered off. It's absolutely harmless. It's a marker, though, of other proteins in the body that get glycated. So when glucose attaches to other proteins in the body and they form those inflammatory products or amidori products, they then deposit in tissues and they cause cross-linked chains. And those chains are irreversible. You cannot undo them once they deposit. So that's why we hear and we see in diabetes patients, they get hands that they can't close. That's the stiff hand syndrome or the prayer sign, whereas you and I can actually touch fingers down. Inflammatory proteins, those amidori products, end-stage products, they deposit in tendon tissue. So these tendons get tight. They deposit in nerve tissue and retarding the movement or the impulse, the nerve impulse going up so that we get pins and needles. They deposit in the heart. They deposit in the brain. So those advanced glycation end products, the AGE, they are inflammatory proteins that we now know are contributors to all the complications. So backtracking then, where did it start? It started with high glucose and glycosylation, because I don't have diabetes and you don't have diabetes, but guess what? We still have a glycated hemoglobin. It's just not as prolific as in diabetes, which means we also have advanced glycation end products, just not as many as patients with diabetes. So a person with diabetes and glucose disorder will have advanced aging. Their body just ages much faster internally than those of us who don't have diabetes at this point in time, because we are depositing AGE, just not as much. Similarly, patients with insulin resistance, they will have, if they're destined to develop type 2 diabetes because of genetics, they will have elevated glucose, but not in a diabetes range, and they will be developing AGE, albeit asymptomatically. So insulin and insulin resistance are key players in the problems that we're seeing in a lot of chronic disease in our community. And it's all linked to increasing central adiposity. Now, there is a caveat to that statement. Not every obese person develops diabetes, but 85% of people with type 2 diabetes do carry excess weight in their abdomen.
It's a significant number.
Yes, 85%, that's a big number. So in those people, to help them, we need to help them reduce their abdominal fat. So what about all the other centrally obese people who don't develop diabetes? Why don't they? Because they don't have the gene. You have to have the genetic predisposition, because if it was non-genetic, that means that 64 to 68% of our society would have type 2 diabetes, and the data just doesn't support that. So it's more than just carrying excess abdominal fat. And so when patients hear that, they go, that's good, I haven't got diabetes, therefore it's okay.
I'm all good, I don't have to worry about it.
Well, they do have to worry about it, because it is associated with increasing risks of heart disease, and it is associated with increasing risks of nephropathy, varicose veins, stasis dermatitis in the legs. It's associated with increased benign intracranial hypertension, which can be life-threatening or sight-threatening. It is associated with cardiomyopathies. Central adiposity is associated with gallstones, prostate cancer, bowel cancer, breast cancer, and uterine cancer. Right? They're not benign conditions. It's okay, I'm carrying excess weight. I'm avoiding using the word fat because that's a cosmetic statement. I'm carrying excess abdominal fat around my abdomen. It's more than that. It's not a harmless state of being. It's something that you will feel fine, but it is killing us slowly inside. And so where in all of this then does the general practitioner sit? Okay, so I'm going to give you a scenario, and I want you to think clearly and visualise this, and so the listeners can visualise it as well. Imagine that you got in the mail, congratulations, you've won a brand new vehicle. For you, what would that be? You get it says any vehicle you like.
What car?
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a car enthusiast, so
Yeah.
this is a hard question for me to answer. Look, at this point in time, I would say a G-Wagon AMG Brabus.
Okay, what colour?
It'd be a toss-up between black and silver, or like
Okay.
a matte colour. Matte
Okay,
finish.
so a matte, let's go matte black.
Yep. let's go
Matte black, AMG.
Tickets arrived in the mail.
Yep.
You got it.
You got it. And what colour interior?
Oh, something creamy but not white.
Okay, creamy, not white. Automatic or manual?
Manual.
Manual. And the ticket says all bells and whistles included. Okay,
Safety
we're
pack,
talking. Yeah,
headlights.
we're talking everything. So you go off to
sick wheels.
and it says, please attend this dealer for pickup of your vehicle. Okay, so you turn up, and there it is, matte black, cream interior, all bells and whistles, the car of your dreams. And there's two of them, side by side. So he gives you the keys, trust you, you won it. He says, just, take it for a drive. You come back and the guy says, what's it feel like? Car of my dreams, drives beautifully, fantastic, okay? I could see myself driving this for the next 20 years. He said, well, drive the other one as well. It's the only difference is maybe there's a little bit of rose gold here. Just take it for a drive, right? You take it for a drive, comes back, and feels exactly the same. Drove the same, smelt the same, felt the same on the road. Which one do you choose?
I don't know. Either one? Maybe the matte black one?
Well, they're both matte black.
Oh, shit. I'm not sure. Bit of rose gold? I don't know. Is it a trick question?
No, it's not a trick question. Just pick it. Pick one.
Matte black.
Matte black.
The original one.
Original. Very first one.
Drove the same.
Yeah.
Felt the same.
Everybody
Smelled.
would pick the first one.
Okay.
And the reason they pick the first one is it's the one that's longest in their memory.
Okay.
So they pick the first one. And he goes, good choice, sir. Come in, we'll sign the papers and we'll transfer. And you're going in and, but we'll drive it off and just do a final detail before we give it to you. And as they're driving it, you turn around and go, oh. You look at it, it's driving up and blue smoke comes out of its behind.
Uh-oh.
The car you just chose.
Uh-oh.
A bit of blue tinge to the smoke. Which one do you want now?
I'll take the other one, thanks.
Why?
No blue smoke, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's no blue smoke.
Yeah.
They both drove off together.
Yeah.
Right? So you now changed your mind.
Uh-oh. This
And
one's
you've-
faulty. I want the other one.
Okay, because there might be something wrong with it. There's a warning sign. Okay? So medically, let's now change this model to a medical model. You come in, you've got diabetes, and I will do blood tests, blood pressure examinations, cholesterol levels, urine tests for microalbuminuria, eye checkups to see if there's any evidence of damage to your vision because of diabetes. And I ask you how you're feeling. You go, I feel fine. I feel really good.
Same as I've always felt.
Yeah, same as I've always felt.
No different.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. I look at your pathology results and you're leaking protein from your kidneys. But doc, I feel fine. Okay? Just like that first car, it felt and drove beautifully. It's blue smoke is what made you change something, change your mind. As doctors, we look for blue smoke. I look for the microalbumin leak. I look for a cholesterol that's elevated. I look at the HbA1c because everybody feels fine. Why? Because we adapt. You can have chronic hypoglycemia and initially it might cause you symptoms, but over a period of time, that thirst, that dry mouth, that urination at night becomes part of your normality and you don't recognise it as abnormal. I feel fine. You know, it's the same as I've always been. you've adapted. So blue smoke
Wow.
is the key to preventing the car, that beautiful car, that matte black with the creamy interior, manual with all the bells and whistles, breaking down on the freeway because you ignored the blue smoke that came out the back.
Yeah.
So finding blue smoke in people with chronic disease is paramount. In diabetes, it's easy because it's all about end organ damage. In osteoporosis, it's easy, except we're wanting to actually prevent that end organ damage, and there's only one way to do it. It's to basically prevent a fracture, because the end organ damage in osteoporosis is fracture. How do we prevent fractures in osteoporosis? Well, we're going to go into detail that a bit further on, time permitting. But let's focus on some of the other things that you had on our little, hey, chin wag list today.
Well, I like how we've gone through walking versus calories in, calories out, the food. I think let's dive into the food component, if you don't mind, and let's debunk some things. In your experience as a GP, what are you finding? Are there any trends with nutrition, or what really? I hate that word, trends, but what's working best in your battle against chronic condition management or weight loss, or I guess all of the above?
Okay, well, let's start with the statement. All diets work. All diets will help people lose weight because all diets are calorie restricted. The only way you can lose weight is to reduce the amount of energy you're putting into your body and increasing the amount of energy you burn. And in any weight loss system, what we're trying to create is a 300 calorie a day deficit. So you can achieve that by reducing your intake by 150 calories and increasing your output by 150 calories. So there's your 300 calorie deficit, all right? And I say to patients, all diets work, especially if you stick to them properly. Now, do they all work forever? No, because it's a diet mentality. The diet mentality is, I'll go on this diet, I'll lose the weight, and then when I reach my goal, I don't have to stay on the diet anymore. And what normally happens? Regain plus 15%. And so you've got keto diet, paleo diet, South Beach diet, Mayo Clinic diet, Cyro diet, Atkins diet, Mediterranean diet, vegetarian diet, pure plant diet, Beverly Hills diet, 5-2 diet, Gutbusters diet, right? There are so many I can't remember them, right? They've all got one thing in common. They all work for a period of time. Now, what do I believe diets need to do? So diets need to incorporate optimizing nutrition. It's all about the nutrient value that we're putting into our body, because we are a complex mix of cells and function. And I believe I will die and they will still be finding out new things about the human body well after I've gone. Because at the end of the day, everything interacts with everything in our body. Food that goes in is based on quality and quantity. You can have high quality foods, but if you eat too much of it, you're increasing your total caloric intake. And one of the things I say to patients is, look, cows get fat eating grass, right? And they go, what do you mean? I said, they're constantly eating. They're grazing, and the only thing they eat is grass. They get fat. And the next thing, have you ever seen a skinny gorilla? And they go, no. I said, all they eat is fruit. So if you think about it, they're consuming a lot of energy because they're also fairly active at times. So at the end of the day, we need to be contained in the amount of energy we put into our body. You know, we weren't created as a bottomless pit to just keep pouring calories into. Now, over the years, what have I been a great supporter of? And this one will go back to 2010, all right? So Prior to 2010, I was a great supporter of the Australian Nutrition Foundation guidelines, where it promotes at least, that word, at least 6 to 8 carbohydrates from grains per day. And as soon as you say to anybody at least, and you don't give them at most, that gap gets very wide. And so prior to 2010, the message that you'd give people is it's not about diet, it's about lifestyle. Because you can always break a diet, you just can't break a lifestyle. It's the way you live, and what you do in that. And so to help patients understand the difference between a diet and a lifestyle, diets are deprivational, all right? So you're deprived, you indulge, and then you feel guilty about it, and you start the diet all over again. So every Monday, people start new diets. And every Wednesday, they give up and they indulge, and then they feel guilty on Sunday, and then let's start the diet again on Monday. And the example I give for that is, what's your favourite food?
Pizza.
Pizza, okay. And normally, how often would you have a pizza?
At least once a week.
At least once a week.
Yeah.
So if I said to you, that's it, you've had your last pizza, you are not going to have enough, on this diet, you're not allowed to have pizza ever again.
Yeah.
What would you do?
Without a doubt, I would try and get all of Brisbane's best pizza in before I started that diet. So I'd probably handpick all my favourite restaurants and go visit all of them in a weekend or something. Something crazy.
All right. So,
I can't even fathom that.
Yeah. So most of us would say, it's like smoking. I'm going to stop smoking. I'm going to, you flood yourself. I'll get it all in, right? Yeah. And then I'm going to deprive myself. Now, the chances that you will never have another pizza after you've stuffed your face for that week is 0.
Okay.
Absolutely 0. And the model goes like this. I would say to somebody, chocolate Tim Tams, double dipped caramel chocolate Tim Tams. And you go and at home, they're in the pantry, there's this untouched packet. Right? There's 20 biscuits untouched. And every time you open up the pantry, there's this voice coming from the Tim Tam pack, eat me.
Yeah.
And the person says, no, I want to die.
Yeah.
Closes the door. 2 hours later, eat me, closes. And they can resist only so long. And they open it up, eat us. So they open the packet, they start with 1. I'll only have 1, that's it, just 1. And before you know it, they've had the whole packet because they've been deprived.
Okay.
They've now indulged.
Yeah.
Okay? At the end of that packet, they go, shit.
What have I done?
What have I done? I feel, oh, well, may as well keep going.
Weekend's
and I'll start.
ruined.
Yep, may as well keep going. It's ruined anyway. I'll start the diet again on Monday.
Yeah.
Deprivation, indulgence, guilt.
Yeah.
Okay. Diets deprive. They are useful with support and self-control and motivation to achieve weight loss goals. But they long-term are doomed to fail. Versus developing a system of eating that has been proven to be associated with lower rates of heart disease, lower rates of diabetes, plus reversal of diabetes, improved diabetes control if you have diabetes, reduced Alzheimer's, reduced bowel cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, gallbladder disease, reduced depression rates, reduced the newest one that came, because I'm going to tell you which diet this is. Mm-hmm. What was it? Oh, reduced rates of osteoporosis. Okay? The Mediterranean diet. 1962, 7-country study, looking at the 7 countries that bordered on the Mediterranean, at an observational study, looking at the food intake versus the presence or absence of heart disease. Again, not a random control trial, not crossover, observational, epidemiological study. And it basically was published, and it took the pyramid of Western society and said, you're wrong. Okay? All wrong. 1962. Fantastic. Let's get 1992. It's starting to become mainstream.
Okay.
All right? Evidence is there. But where they look at their pyramid is not based on food groups. It's based on main meal, every day, weekly, sparingly. Right? And it's got different food types in each group. Fast forward from 92 to 2010, Vienna, European Society for the Study of Diabetes. I wasn't there, but I listened to a podcast like this, and it was the great protein debate.
Okay.
Okay? So, European debate against Western society, America, Australia debate about the macronutrient breakdown of food that we should be having. Now, not micronutrients, macro, fats, proteins, carbs. And so at the end of it, the presentation, the debate, floor was opened to questions. So one very brave soul from Europe stood up and said, "Thank you for this very detailed discussion, but I have one question. Is it possible that we could ask an astronomer to have a look at the data? Because I believe he's got as much chance of getting it right as you two guys have."
Oh.
The room exploded into laughter. When it hushed down, he basically said, "We in Europe have lower carb advices than you do in the United States with your very heavy base of your pyramid, minimum 5 serves of carbohydrates a day.
Yeah.
Our diet in Europe, especially the Mediterranean regions, is lower carb, not low carb, higher fat and moderate protein. We have less obesity rates than you do. We have less diabetes than you do. We have less heart disease than you do. We have less of everything than you do. Is it possible," he challenged, "that maybe your dietary advices need to be modified?" And there was a hush.
Wow.
Right? Because what he was talking about was all the evidence that we now have about the Mediterranean diet. Now, the Mediterranean diet has gone through changes, whether it be the modified med diet for the United States, the low-carb version for Germany and above, the low-carb modified version for the east coast of America, versus the Syro component that we have here, which is very close to Mediterranean, or the modified med diet that Melbourne Greeks would eat, right? At the end of the day, there's a diet, and they called it a diet. The trend now, and I'm reading a evidence-based, basic 600-page manual on the Mediterranean lifestyle evidence base. And they're starting to use the terminology, the modern Mediterranean diet.
Okay.
And they're wanting to introduce the term, the modern Mediterranean food list. Get away from that word diet and use food list and portion control. So in this modern Mediterranean food list, it basically promotes a 35 to 45% total caloric intake from carbohydrate, approximately 25 to 30% from protein, and mostly fish and plant legumes and lentils and beans as being a protein source, and the remainder from monounsaturated fats. It doesn't support high sugar intake, as in particular, it says, okay, if you're going to have sugar, don't have any more than 3 cans of soft drink a week, for example, all right? It supports dairy, but it's fixed in its quantity. It supports fructose intake in the form of fruit, but again, fixed in its quantity, 160 to 240 grams per day. You know, it's not, let's have 3 pieces of fruit.
Yeah, 7 pieces of fruit in your smoothie.
Yeah, it's not where people say, I only have 3 pieces of fruit a day. And one of those happens to be a rock melon, okay, another one happens to be a mega-sized apple or a huge orange. It's 160 to 240 grams of fruit per day. And when I say to them, will you weigh your banana? And they go, which one, the ladyfinger or the huge Cavendish? I said, take the skin off and weigh it. You'd be surprised how heavy a Cavendish banana actually is. It's about 120 to 140 grams. So you've already met the minimum in that one piece of fruit. So the Mediterranean food list is very specific. It's not an open license to eat quality food without quantity. But it is a way of eating that reduces cholesterol, improves HDL, reduces LDL, and it's rated number 1 in the world as being the easiest diet to follow, number 1 in the world for diabetes prevention, number 2 in the world for diabetes control, number 26 in the world for rapid weight loss. Yeah. So the key is to understand you don't do the Mediterranean style eating for rapid weight loss. You do it for the ability to stay on this eating pattern, that you will achieve your weight loss, but along the way, well and truly before you achieve the weight loss, you've improved your glucose control, your blood pressure, your cholesterol.
All of the important health markers.
Yeah. You could spend a whole hour and a half just discussing the eating style of the Mediterranean food list. Yeah.
I'd love to somewhat start to wrap up our podcast with anything that you deem important as a bit of a finishing statement to our community and our listeners for today's podcast. I know that perhaps hopefully in the future we can sit down again and dive deep into resistance training. That was another one that that we were going to off air we were talking about that. Yeah.
Well, why don't I finish up by packaging it together?
Let's do that.
For your listeners who are health professionals and for listeners who are non-health professionals.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So for the non-health professionals, my recommendation is live till you die, right? Don't let any chronic disease stop you enjoying life. Live long and well, but your wellness doesn't come from doctors, it comes from you yourself. It comes from what you're going to put into your body and how you're going to use that energy to improve your functionality and well-being. Your well-being needs a foundation of the right food and the right exercise. Remembering that walking is an activity of daily living just like eating is. Exercise refers to resistance and strength training, and it needs to be incorporated into everything that we do, because walking does not give you strength. Walking doesn't give you the ability to stop yourself falling over if you stumble. That's where strength comes in, strength of your lower limb girdle. So you do need resistance and strength training. And now with Sydney University telling us that resistance training actually reverses early cognitive decline and prevents cognitive impairment, we are now looking at a lifestyle way of preventing dementia, because the drugs don't work. The drugs for Alzheimer's, all that they do is they plateau it and slow the progress. They do not reverse it, and they do not stop it progressing. Here we have something that we can do without drugs to actually prevent and reverse. All right? So that's to our non-healthcare professional listeners. To the healthcare professional listeners, my advice would be start the dialogue with people that you see. They are human beings with a problem. That problem might be a mental health issue, as in depression or anxiety, or body dysmorphia. They don't like the body that they see. Or they've got chronic diseases like diabetes and osteoporosis and heart disease that needs an intensive support program. Now, hold their hands and take them through it, because not everybody's going to have the same motivation. You can pick the ones that are motivated, because they're the guys that come in to say, just tell me what to do and I'll go home and do it, all right? And I'll come back in 6 weeks and show it to you. Now, that sort of person, that's music to my ears, because I don't have to expend as much energy. But the majority aren't like that.
Yeah.
So the majority actually need us to hold their hand as we get them going, and then hold their hand less, and then let them learn that they can actually do all this. And you and I have debated resistance training for years.
Yeah.
What it means to you and what it means, what my philosophy on it is.
Yeah.
Because I'm about health and you're about health plus, right? Health plus performance. I'm simply about health and preventing glycemia, preventing falls and fractures. So a lot of my advice to my patients is not this high intensity interval training. It's more about endurance and progressive load building. And it both work. So for the time poor people, yes, HIIT's great. For the time rich people, the slow progressive is just as beneficial, because the Mediterranean eating pattern, it's the number 24 on rapid weight loss. So nothing needs to happen quickly.
Yeah.
Everything in health is important. Sometimes it's urgent and sometimes it's not urgent. And that decision on how you triage important, urgent, important, not urgent, dictates which step we're going to take when we add in the resistance training, because it must be added in. It has to be added in. You cannot prevent osteoporosis, fractures, without resistance training. And you cannot prevent the progress of type 2 diabetes just with walking. Studies have proven it. You get reductions in A1C and you can prevent the progress of type 2 diabetes, meaning progressive failure of pancreas, with resistance training. But I'd love to spend a whole session on resistance training and chronic disease further down the track. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. I know how precious and valuable your time is, Dr. Chrys. Thank you so much for that. I think a lot of our community is going to benefit from today's podcast. It's been quite powerful. Thank you. Let's end it here.
You're welcome.
Thank you for coming in.